April 3rd, 2008. A cold, persistent rain, typical of an unpredictable Indiana spring, was drumming a melancholic rhythm against the window panes of the small, unassuming bungalow on Sycamore Street, casting the interior of the living room in a perpetual aqueous twilight. A single, small, tarnished silver earring, shaped like a miniature crescent moon, lay nestled beneath the worn edge of the area rug, its faint gleam catching the brief, sporadic bursts of light that managed to penetrate the oppressive cloud cover, a metallic testament to an event that, at precisely 6:30 p.m., would irrevocably shatter the quiet domesticity of the suburban town of Crestwood. 38-year-old Sarah Jenkins, a woman defined by her fierce maternal devotion and a quiet, unassuming strength, had just returned from her shift at the local library, the scent of old paper and dust still clinging faintly to her worn blue raincoat. She was in the kitchen, carefully measuring ground coffee for her evening cup, the gentle, comforting whir of the grinder, a familiar sound of the transition from the day's demands to the evening's brief reprieve. Her only daughter, 16-year-old Lily Jenkins, a bright, aspiring writer whose expressive eyes held the boundless curiosity of youth, was upstairs in her small bedroom, theoretically working on a history assignment, but more likely lost in the pages of a beloved novel, surrounded by the comforting clutter of teenage life. Lily, a responsible and meticulously organized high school sophomore, had followed her routine precisely. She had arrived home from school at 3:15 p.m., immediately started a load of laundry, and had called her best friend Maya around 5:30 p.m., a conversation Sarah vaguely overheard concerning a difficult math problem and plans for the upcoming weekend. The last confirmed communication was a text message sent by Lily to Maya at 6:11 p.m., a simple, characteristic message confirming their study session for Saturday morning. The front door of the bungalow, always kept locked in the evenings, was slightly ajar when Sarah finally entered the living room at 6:42 p.m., the cold, damp air rushing in, displacing the cozy warmth of the house. A single muddy footprint, larger than Lily's size 7 tennis shoe, marred the otherwise clean surface of the linoleum just inside the threshold, a stark foreign intrusion into the sanctity of their home. Sarah's internal alarm bells, an instinct honed by years of single motherhood, immediately screamed. Her initial call upstairs, a simple, questioning, "Lily, are you home?" was met with a silence that felt heavy, profound, and utterly unnatural. She quickly ascended the creaking wooden staircase, her heart rate accelerating with each step, the methodical pacing of her ascent contrasting sharply with the rising tide of panic. Lily's bedroom, normally a whirlwind of activity and youthful energy, was eerily quiet, her history textbook lying open on her desk, a small, handwritten note stuck to the margin, an innocuous reminder about an upcoming deadline. But Lily was gone. The clothes she had been wearing that day, her favorite worn jeans and a school sweatshirt, were folded neatly on her bed, suggesting she had changed. But where were the clothes she changed into? Her backpack, filled with books and papers, was slumped against the desk leg. Her phone, the ubiquitous technological appendage of modern adolescence, lay face down on her pillow. Everything suggested a momentary departure, a casual, short-term absence. Yet the front door ajar and the muddy footprint spoke a terrifying, discordant language. Sarah Jenkins, standing in the doorway of her daughter's silent room, her eyes fixed on the open textbook, had no way of knowing that this mundane tableau, this everyday symphony of routine, would be the final, indelible image of normalcy before the world, as she knew it, fractured into an unbearable, agonizing mystery. Detective Lieutenant Michael "Mike" Thompson, a man whose dark, close-cropped hair and stern demeanor belied a deep-seated empathy for victims, and a 20-year veteran of the Crestwood Police Department, was reviewing cold case files at precisely 7:05 p.m. when the first frantic call came into dispatch, a direct plea from Sarah Jenkins, her voice hoarse with a primal, suffocating fear. She reported her daughter missing, emphasizing the details that defied logic: the open door, the muddy footprint, the phone left behind, the mundane details of the day, the freshly ground coffee, the open textbook, the folded laundry, would in the coming days become sacred relics, poignant reminders of a life abruptly paused, a routine violently interrupted. The small, tarnished silver earring, still lying unobserved beneath the rug's edge, remained unnoticed for another excruciating 96 hours, until a diligent state police evidence technician conducting a secondary sweep of the house finally spotted it, a minute, solitary clue, destined to hold a quarter-century of unspoken truths. The immediate hours after Sarah Jenkins's frantic call devolved into a chaotic maelstrom of fear, and uncoordinated searching within the tight-knit suburban streets of Crestwood. Detective Thompson, arriving on Sycamore Street at 7:30 p.m., surveyed the scene with the practiced eye of a man who had witnessed the terrifying birth of too many missing persons cases. The cold, persistent rain continued its relentless drumming, the weather as a character device, amplifying the sense of dread and urgency. The grey, oppressive light mirroring the suffocating fear settling over the small town. He knew with a certainty that chilled him to the bone that the first few hours were paramount, a rapidly closing window of opportunity that often dictated the outcome of such agonizing disappearances, particularly one beginning with an unexplained home entry. The Crestwood Police Department, a relatively small municipal force, was immediately overwhelmed. Calls flooded the dispatch line, not just from concerned neighbors, but from regional media outlets in Indianapolis and Bloomington, their reporters sensing the escalating tragedy. Thompson, a man who believed in the methodical, relentless pursuit of facts, immediately established a command center in the Jenkins' neighbor's garage, transforming the cluttered space into a hub of controlled chaos. He instructed his officers to canvass the entire Sycamore Street neighborhood, to speak with every resident, to check every garage, every shed, every patch of overgrown brush, focusing particularly on any unusual vehicles or persons seen between 6:15 and 6:45 p.m. He called for K-9 units from the county sheriff's office, knowing the scent of the muddy footprint could be a critical, albeit ephemeral, lead in the damp conditions. Sarah Jenkins, her initial frantic energy slowly giving way to a profound, desperate weariness, clung to the faintest whisper of hope, her maternal instinct demanding action. She provided every minute detail about Lily, her friends, her habits, her dreams, a detailed portrait of innocence and potential, heightening the tragedy and fulfilling the victim's characterization with high empathy. The "if only" began to whisper, an insidious, tormenting refrain in her mind. If only she had arrived home 5 minutes earlier. If only she had insisted Lily bring her phone downstairs. If only the door had been triple locked. These small, innocuous decisions, utterly meaningless in the grand tapestry of everyday life, now loomed as monumental turning points, the hinges upon which her daughter's fate had irrevocably turned. The initial searches focused on Lily's known haunts, the route to her best friend Maya's house, the local park where she sometimes read, the short wooded path to the bus stop. Search teams, initially buoyant with a desperate hope, began to return hours later, their faces grim, their shoulders slumped, shaking their heads in silent, agonizing negation. There were no discarded belongings, no signs of a struggle near the front door beyond the single muddy print, no eyewitnesses. It was as if Lily had simply vanished from the interior of her own home, plucked from the safety of her domestic sanctuary by an invisible, malevolent force. The collective disbelief in the small, close-knit suburban community was palpable. Crestwood, a town priding itself on its low crime rates and quiet neighborhoods, was now gripped by a pervasive, chilling fear. Doors that had always been open were now locked, and the sight of children playing outdoors unsupervised was replaced by a somber quiet, a heavy shroud of apprehension that suffocated the natural rhythms of daily life. Suspicion, a venomous, insidious thing, began to fester. Neighbors eyed each other with a new, guarded wariness. Every stranger, every unfamiliar car became a potential threat. The hidden in plain sight device began its slow, agonizing crawl into the town's psyche. Who among them could be capable of such an unthinkable act? Was it the quiet man who lived 2 houses down, the one who worked strange hours? Was it the delivery driver who frequently passed Sycamore Street? The questions, whispered in hushed tones, turned friends into suspects and trust into a fragile, easily shattered commodity. Detective Thompson, acutely aware of the corrosive effect of prolonged uncertainty on a community, worked tirelessly to temper the growing paranoia, reminding his officers to stick to the facts, to avoid speculation, to maintain a professional detachment. But even he felt the chilling tendrils of irrational fear begin to creep into his own thoughts. The persistent cold rain, still drumming on the windows, felt like a steady, inescapable march toward disaster. The passage of hours brought no answers, only a deepening, unbearable silence. The initial flood of media attention began to recede, replaced by sporadic updates and the grim designation of a cold case in local news reports. The FBI, after an exhaustive but fruitless 10-day search, officially scaled back their presence, leaving Detective Thompson and his dwindling team to shoulder the crushing weight of an unsolved mystery. The reward for information, initially a modest $20,000, grew steadily as concerned citizens and local businesses contributed, eventually reaching a staggering $150,000, a testament to the collective despair and the desperate hope for a breakthrough. But still, nothing. The leads grew colder, the tips dwindled, and the relentless march of time began its agonizing work, slowly transforming active investigation into a haunting, perpetual ache. The meticulous collection of forensic evidence from the Jenkinses' home, including the single muddy footprint impression taken with dental plaster and environmental samples from the front porch, were each item meticulously bagged and labeled, destined for a storage locker where they would rest, undisturbed for 20 long years, mute witnesses to the agonizing silence. The small tarnished silver earring, still resting undisturbed beneath the rug's edge, remained a silent, unexamined clue, its significance utterly unknown, waiting patiently for a future generation of forensic science to unlock its tragic story. The agonizing, slow-burn pacing of the investigation transitioned into the prolonged, cruel phase of the cold case, a period characterized by the slow erosion of hope and the relentless physical passage of time. As the cold, wet spring of 2008 gave way to a humid Indiana summer, the initial flurry of police activity surrounding the disappearance of Lily Jenkins slowly, inexorably subsided. The red and white police tape was removed from the Sycamore Street bungalow, but the emotional cordon around the home and around Sarah Jenkins's heart remained firmly in place. Sarah, the quintessential protagonist of grief, transformed her despair into a formidable, obsessive tenacity. She resigned from her library job, dedicating her life entirely to advocating for Lily. She created the Lily's Light Foundation, printing thousands of flyers with her daughter's image, her bright, curious eyes, a constant, heart-wrenching reminder of the potential lost, and maintained a small, perpetually updated website that served as the digital archive of the case. She became a familiar sight at community events, her voice, though softer now, unwavering in its insistence that her daughter would not be forgotten. Her home, the site of the inciting incident, became a meticulously preserved shrine. The items from that last normal day, the open history textbook, the coffee grinder, untouched, a domestic museum dedicated to absence, the tarnished silver crescent moon earring remained beneath the edge of the rug, a quiet metallic secret patiently waiting to be discovered. Detective Thompson, the weary detective, carried the burden of the unsolved case like a physical weight. He kept a dedicated Lily Jenkins file, a thick, perpetually expanding binder, stored not in the inactive archives, but in his personal filing cabinet, reviewing it meticulously on the 3rd of every month, the anniversary of her disappearance. He would often drive by the Sycamore Street bungalow, watching Sarah's determined, yet heartbreaking rituals, a constant silent reminder of his professional failure and the profound injustice suffered by a mother and her child. The passage of time device was starkly evident. Lily's 17th, 18th, and 19th birthdays passed, each marked by Sarah with a solitary, unlit candle placed on the windowsill, representing the flame of life violently extinguished. Thompson's dark hair began to show streaks of grey, the lines around his eyes deepening as the years blurred. 2009, 2010, 2011, each one adding another layer of dust to the growing pile of unanswered questions. The community of Crestwood, while moving on with its daily routines, never truly recovered its shattered equilibrium. The irony of the safe, quiet suburb contrasted sharply with the horror that had occurred within its bounds, leaving a permanent scar of distrust. Parents continued to walk their children to the bus stop, their caution an unspoken acknowledgement of the fragility of their security. The leads dwindled to almost nothing. The muddy footprint, painstakingly preserved, yielded a rough shoe size and tread pattern, a common utility boot, but without a suspect. It was a piece of information that led nowhere. The environmental samples taken from the front porch, a mix of Indiana soil, fine grit, and a few stray fibers, were catalogued and stored, their microscopic potential forgotten by all but a few dedicated evidence custodians. The relentless cold and humidity of the Indiana weather became a recurring motif, the harsh seasonal shifts reflecting the emotional turbulence that perpetually defined Sarah's life. The whispers of the "if only" became a silent language shared between Sarah and Thompson, a mutual acknowledgement of the small, random confluence of events that had led to tragedy. If only a passing car had been equipped with a dash cam. If only a neighbor had looked out their window at that precise moment. If only the initial sweep for evidence had been more comprehensive. The small, tarnished silver earring, still lying unobserved beneath the rug's edge, remained a silent, metallic clue, its significance utterly unknown, waiting patiently for a future generation of forensic science to unlock its tragic story. Thompson retired in 2020. The Lily Jenkins case, the indelible failure etched into his legacy. He passed the file, thick and unwieldy, to the next generation of cold case detectives, a quiet ritual of transference, the burden now resting on younger shoulders. But the ghost of Lily Jenkins remained tethered to his soul. The chilling, relentless march of time, a force more insidious than any human antagonist, continued its work, transforming the cold case of Lily Jenkins into a spectral presence that loomed over the town of Crestwood like a permanent shadow. As the 2010s gave way to the 2020s, Sarah Jenkins, the tenacious mother, bore the indelible marks of her prolonged grief. Now in her early 60s, her dark hair was threaded with white, her movements slower, but the fire in her eyes, fueled by 20 years of unanswered questions, remained undimmed. Her home continued to be the quiet, living museum of Lily's absence, the open textbook gathering a layer of dust that she meticulously wiped clean on the 3rd of every month. She had become an authority on forensic science and missing persons advocacy, her sophisticated vocabulary now encompassing terms like mitochondrial DNA and familial searching, a testament to her unrelenting pursuit of an answer. Detective Thompson, living a quiet retirement in a nearby town, still received her calls, his role evolving into that of a sympathetic confidant and a keeper of the old ways of the investigation, his voice, though older and calmer, always carrying the weight of shared sorrow. The Crestwood Police Department, now led by younger officers who had only heard the Lily Jenkins case as a somber legend, occasionally reviewed the file, but the sheer volume of old static data and the absence of any new leads made it a daunting, almost insurmountable task. The passage of time device was starkly evident. Lily's contemporaries were now adults with families, their memories of the bright, aspiring writer tinged with the bittersweet melancholy of a life cut tragically short. The small silver crescent moon earring, still embedded beneath the rug's edge, remained a quiet, metal secret, a constant physical link to the moment of the crime, unknown to all but the perpetrator and the unseen forces of fate. The forensic evidence, meticulously stored for decades, became a silent testament to the painstaking work of the original investigators. The dental plaster impression of the muddy footprint, the environmental samples from the front porch, and a handful of microscopic fibers collected from the staircase, all carefully preserved, each item meticulously bagged and labeled, destined for a storage locker where they would rest, undisturbed, for decades, mute witnesses to the agonizing silence. The forensic salvation theme, however, was still a distant, almost mythical promise, a whisper in the dark of a scientific miracle yet to come. The profound irony of the situation was that the key to unlocking the truth lay hidden in the very home Sarah had struggled to keep whole, a tiny piece of metal less than 3 feet from where she poured her daily, ritualistic cup of coffee. This patient waiting was the ultimate, tragic irony. The solution had been there all along, a tiny, innocuous object, overlooked in the chaos of a frantic search, destined to become the pivotal piece of evidence that would finally bring a measure of peace to a mother haunted by ghosts. In the year 2028, exactly 2 decades after the disappearance of Lily Jenkins, a new wave of scientific advancement began to ripple through the seemingly insurmountable walls of cold cases across the nation. This was the era of forensic salvation, specifically the revolutionary convergence of advanced DNA sequencing and genetic genealogy, a powerful, almost mystical ability to trace an unknown suspect's family tree through publicly accessible genealogical databases. It was a scientific breakthrough that promised to unlock secrets that had been buried for generations, to speak for the dead who had long been silenced. The relentless passage of time, once the cruelest antagonist, now began to reveal itself as an unwitting ally. As the sheer volume of genetic data accumulated over decades finally reached a critical mass, in Crestwood, Sarah Jenkins, the obsessive and tenacious protagonist, had used her foundation's funds to lobby the Indiana State Police to re-examine the case with the newest available technology. Her tenacity paid off. A small, new cold case unit, led by Dr. Anya Sharma, a fresh-eyed investigator and a brilliant forensic geneticist in her early 40s, accepted the challenge. Dr. Sharma, viewing cold cases not as dead ends, but as intricate puzzles waiting for the right key, focused immediately on the minute forensic evidence collected from the crime scene. The core of Dr. Sharma's strategy lay in the concept of genetic genealogy, a method that utilized the vast, ever-growing repositories of genetic information submitted by ordinary citizens to commercial genealogy sites. By uploading an unknown suspect's DNA profile to these public databases, Dr. Sharma and her team could identify distant relatives, then construct elaborate family trees, meticulously narrowing down the pool of potential suspects to a single individual. The first hurdle was the biological evidence itself. During a systematic tertiary re-examination of the crime scene evidence, an evidence technician working under Dr. Sharma's directive for hyperfocus collection finally discovered the small, tarnished silver crescent moon earring beneath the edge of the area rug in the living room. Its presence, unexplained and uncatalogued in the original reports, immediately flagged it as potential evidence. Although the earring itself was metallic, its tarnish and contact with the rug fibers allowed Dr. Sharma's team to extract a minuscule yet viable cellular sample, a microscopic trace of skin cells and sweat, likely from the perpetrator's hand or clothing, transferred during a momentary loss of control. This was the pivotal moment, the long-awaited scientific breakthrough. The process of DNA extraction, once a painstaking, often futile endeavor for such degraded samples, had advanced dramatically. Using cutting-edge low-template DNA, (LTDNA) techniques, Dr. Sharma's team amplified the minuscule amount of genetic material, creating a full male DNA profile, albeit one that yielded no immediate matches in CODIS. The true work, the work of forensic salvation, then began. The anonymous DNA profile was uploaded to a public genetic genealogy database, a digital ocean of family trees and genetic connections. The initial results were overwhelming. Hundreds of distant matches, third and fourth cousins, scattered across the Midwest. The pacing of this phase became a fascinating blend of slow, meticulous genealogical research and sudden, exhilarating bursts of discovery. Dr. Sharma's team, working with an almost obsessive dedication, began to construct complex family trees, tracing ancestral lines back through generations, cross-referencing names, birth dates, and geographical locations. They identified a common set of great-grandparents, then a common set of grandparents, systematically narrowing down the vast, digital haystack of humanity to a single, localized genetic cluster. The weather outside the state police lab in Indianapolis, often characterized by the cold, biting winds of early winter, now felt symbolic of the intense, focused cold of their investigation, a concentrated energy burning through decades of cold data. Sarah Jenkins and Detective Thompson, now a consultant on the case, followed every development with a renewed, desperate hope. Their lives, once defined by absence, now infused with the thrilling possibility of an answer. The irony was profound. The very technology that allowed individuals to trace their ancestry was now being repurposed to unmask a killer, using the innocent act of self-discovery to reveal a dark, hidden truth. The meticulous work of Dr. Sharma's team, fueled by the unwavering commitment of the mother and the spectral presence of the lost daughter, slowly, inexorably, began to converge on a single terrifying name, a name that would shock the quiet suburb of Crestwood to its core. The exhaustive and painstaking work of Dr. Anya Sharma's forensic genealogy team, a methodical journey backward through generations of genetic information, finally began to yield a chillingly specific trajectory pointing towards a lineage deeply rooted in the very soil of Crestwood and its surrounding communities. The hundreds of distant genetic matches, initially a bewildering web of familial connections, were meticulously pruned, each branch of the family tree scrutinized, cross-referenced with public records, obituaries, marriage licenses, census data, a digital excavation of the past. The process, slow and deliberate, required an almost obsessive attention to detail, a quiet, relentless dedication to the invisible threads of human connection. The pacing of this phase was that of an antique clock, each tick a generation traced, each tock a false lead eliminated, until the rhythm accelerated with the narrowing focus. By early 2029, Dr. Sharma's team had successfully constructed a detailed, multi-generational family tree that indicated a strong genetic connection to a cluster of individuals who had all resided in or near Crestwood during the year of the disappearance, 2008. The common ancestral couple, traced back to the late 19th century, had produced numerous descendants, but the genetic markers shared with the unknown suspect's DNA profile led them down a very specific line. This line converged, with terrifying precision, on a single prominent family in Crestwood, a family whose patriarch, a man named Gary Vance, was a well-respected, seemingly innocuous fixture in the community. Gary Vance, a 55-year-old high school history teacher at Crestwood High, the very school Lily had attended, was a man whose quiet, professional demeanor and participation in local civic groups had made him a familiar and trusted face to generations of the town's children and parents. He was known for his dedication to teaching, his consistent presence at school functions, and his involvement in neighborhood watch programs. He had even been interviewed by Detective Thompson in 2008, offering his assistance in the search and expressing his genuine sorrow over Lily's disappearance, a man whose statement was deemed entirely credible at the time. This was the cruelest, most profound expression of the hidden-in-plain-sight device. The perpetrator, the monster, was not a stranger from the shadows but a trusted community pillar, a mentor to the very children he preyed upon, a betrayal that cut to the very soul of the town's identity. The internal monologue of Dr. Sharma, as the genealogical web tightened around Vance, was a mixture of scientific triumph and profound, sickening dread. The data was irrefutable, yet the human implications were almost unbearable. It was a testament to the cold, impartial logic of genetics that it could unveil such a monstrous deception hidden beneath decades of placid normalcy. The passage of time now took on a horrific new dimension. For 20 years, Gary Vance had lived among them, continued teaching their children history, attended PTA meetings, all while harboring the unspeakable secret of Lily Jenkins. The weather outside the state police lab, as Dr. Sharma presented her findings to a newly assembled cold case task force, was a typical Indiana late spring day, warm and sunny, yet the atmosphere in the room was chilling, a stark contrast to the burgeoning vitality outside. Detective Thompson, brought in as a consultant for the new task force, sat in stunned silence as Dr. Sharma laid out the irrefutable evidence, his eyes scanning the detailed family tree that culminated, with horrifying clarity, in the name Gary Vance. The irony was palpable, a bitter taste in his mouth. He remembered Vance from the original investigation, a man who had seemed genuinely concerned, whose alibi of grading papers at home had been easily dismissed as a dead end. The betrayal, the sheer audacity of the deception, was almost too much to comprehend. The task force, now fully aware of the delicate nature of the situation, initiated a covert surveillance operation on Gary Vance. They needed more than just a genetic link. They needed a direct DNA sample from Vance himself to confirm the match definitively. The opportunity arose 2 weeks later, on a warm Monday afternoon in late May. Vance, known for his methodical habits, took a break from his end-of-year grading, stopping at a local coffee shop where he carelessly discarded a used paper cup and a crumpled napkin in a public trash receptacle. A plainclothes state police agent, disguised as a sanitation worker, discreetly collected the items. The cellular material extracted from the rim of the coffee cup and the damp napkin was rushed to the state crime lab. The results, returned within 48 hours, were definitive. The DNA profile from the discarded items was a 100% match to the epithelial cell sample found on the tarnished silver crescent moon earring. This was the moment of the reveal. The scientific salvation, long sought, had finally arrived. The quiet, unassuming high school history teacher, Gary Vance, was the perpetrator. The small, tarnished silver crescent moon earring, still lying in the evidence locker, its silent testimony overlooked for 2 decades, was now understood. It was an artifact of the struggle, an object Lily was likely wearing, knocked off during the horrifying encounter, a silent, enduring witness to the horrifying truth. The meticulous collection of forensic evidence from the Jenkinses' home, including the single muddy footprint impression taken with dental plaster and environmental samples from the front porch, were each item meticulously bagged and labeled, destined for a storage locker where they would rest, undisturbed for 20 long years, mute witnesses to the agonizing silence. The small, tarnished silver crescent moon earring, now understood to have been knocked off during the struggle, remained a silent, unexamined clue, its significance utterly unknown, waiting patiently for a future generation of forensic science to unlock its tragic story. The arrest of Gary Vance, a man whose face had been a symbol of quiet authority and community presence in Crestwood for decades, unfolded with a chilling precision on a sweltering Tuesday morning in early June of 2029. The air was thick with the oppressive humidity that often preceded a violent Indiana thunderstorm, the atmosphere heavy and electric, mirroring the seismic shockwave that was about to rip through the unsuspecting community. Detective Thompson, now an honored consultant, watched from a discreet distance as a convoy of unmarked state police vehicles, their occupants grim-faced and resolute, converged on Vance's meticulously maintained suburban home, just 3 blocks from Crestwood High School. The scene was devoid of the dramatic fanfare often depicted in crime thrillers. It was a quiet, almost somber operation, reflecting the gravity of the 20-year-old mystery. 2 uniformed Crestwood officers, men who had once been Vance's students, approached his front door, their faces carefully neutral. Vance, dressed casually for summer break but still carrying the air of a meticulous educator, emerged onto his porch with a calm, inquisitive expression, as if he expected a casual visit from a former colleague. The moment the lead state police agent, a tall, imposing figure, identified himself and stated the nature of their visit, a subtle, almost imperceptible flicker crossed Vance's face. A momentary loss of composure, a fleeting glimpse of the monster lurking beneath the meticulously maintained facade. The reveal arrest was not a shout, but a whisper, a cold, clinical statement of fact. "Mr. Vance, we have reason to believe you are responsible for the disappearance of Lily Jenkins in April of 2008. We have a warrant for your arrest." The words, delivered calmly and without inflection, hung heavy in the humid air, carrying the full, devastating weight of 20 years of unanswered prayers and shattered lives. Vance's initial reaction was a quiet, almost scholarly denial, a practiced performance of indignant confusion. "Disappearance? That's impossible. I knew Lily. I was on the community search committee." His voice, though slightly strained, retained its usual mild cadence, a chilling testament to his profound capacity for deception. But as the state police agent produced the warrant, specifying the DNA evidence linking him to the silver crescent moon earring, the facade began to crack. His eyes, once benign and seemingly knowledgeable, narrowed almost imperceptibly, and a thin sheen of sweat appeared on his forehead, glistening in the oppressive heat. The hidden-in-plain-sight device now reached its most chilling apex. The man who had taught their children history, who had participated in the searches, who had lived a life of quiet respectability, was the architect of their enduring agony. He was taken into custody without further incident, his hands cuffed behind his back, a quiet moment of profound betrayal that was witnessed only by the surrounding surveillance team. The moment his figure, framed by the familiar suburban landscape and the manicured lawn, was led into the back of an unmarked police car. A ripple of stunned disbelief spread throughout the neighborhood. Neighbors who had been quietly watching from behind drawn curtains gasped, their whispers carrying the collective shock of a community whose deepest fears had just been horrifyingly confirmed. Sarah Jenkins, informed of the arrest moments before it occurred, watched the live news coverage from her living room, the room that had held the secret for 20 years, her face a mixture of profound relief and an overwhelming fresh wave of anguish. She simply reached out her hand, unconsciously brushing the edge of the rug where the earring had rested for 2 decades, and whispered, "It's him, Lily. They finally found him." Her voice, barely audible, carried the weight of years of suffering, now mingled with the dawning realization of a truth long hidden, a bitter, agonizing resolution that demanded the full, horrifying narrative. The interrogation of Gary Vance began hours later, a meticulous, slow-burn psychological chess match conducted under the cold, unforgiving glare of fluorescent lights in a small, windowless room at the state police headquarters in Indianapolis. Dr. Sharma, though primarily a forensic analyst, sat in on the proceedings, her presence a silent, scientific testament to the irrefutable truth of the DNA evidence, while a seasoned state police interrogator, Special Agent Elena Rossi, led the questioning, her tone authoritative yet controlled, patiently chipping away at Vance's initial denial. Vance, initially maintaining his facade of scholarly innocence, repeated his alibi of grading papers on the afternoon of Lily's disappearance. A mundane, unassailable routine. Agent Rossi, however, did not dwell on the alibi, instead focusing on the small, irrefutable pieces of forensic evidence, the epithelial cells from the earring, the single muddy footprint. She presented a high-resolution photograph of the footprint impression, detailed enough to show the unique wear pattern on the sole of a specific utility boot. The hook style of the narrative transitioned from the cinematic freeze frame of the arrest to the clinical, unblinking focus of the interrogation room. Vance, upon seeing the photo of the footprint, visibly flinched. The memory, suppressed for 2 decades, was clearly being violently pulled to the surface. Rossi, utilizing the third-person omniscient perspective to her advantage, described the footprint's origin. "This specific tread pattern, Mr. Vance, belongs to a model of utility boot sold only at a supply store near your weekend cabin, a cabin you purchased in 2007, a location you never mentioned to investigators." The precise, data-driven language, the reliance on technical facts, finally began to dismantle the perpetrator's carefully guarded psychological defenses. It was revealed that Vance, who had spotted Lily at school and developed an unhealthy obsession, had been conducting surveillance on her home and, knowing Sarah's work schedule, had taken the opportunity to enter the home after noticing Lily's car in the driveway and the front door unlocked due to a momentary oversight. The struggle, brief and brutal, occurred in the living room near the entryway, during which Lily's silver crescent moon earring was torn from her ear and deposited under the rug. He confirmed with clinical precision that he had then transported Lily 55 miles to his secluded cabin near the White River, a location far outside the initial search radius where the horrifying crime was completed. The fate of Lily, once a painful, open question, was finally revealed. Vance admitted that he had buried Lily in a shallow, unmarked grave deep within the thick, heavily wooded property surrounding his cabin, covering the site with brush and debris to obscure any signs of disturbance. His profound knowledge of the local topography used for a monstrous purpose. The details were relayed with sparse, direct dialogue and chilling summarized speech, reserving the few direct quotes for his final, almost philosophical statement. "I taught history. I knew how to erase things." The irony was stark and devastating. The man who taught about the past was a master of obscuring his own dark history. The safety of a small town contrasted chillingly with the horror he concealed. The meticulous GPS coordinates provided during the confession, coupled with Vance's detailed, monotonous directions, allowed the state police task force to locate the long-hidden burial site 68 hours after the arrest, deep in a remote, forgotten corner of central Indiana. The discovery, on a bleak, overcast morning, brought with it a profound, visceral wave of melancholic resolution. The resolution that was bittersweet. Lily's body, though long lost, was recovered with painstaking care by forensic anthropologists. The remnants of the clothes she had changed into that day, a few small, deeply personal items, a simple copper bracelet, a small laminated photo of her and Sarah, were meticulously recovered, sacred relics from a life brutally curtailed. The forensic analysis confirmed the identity immediately, bringing an undeniable, painful finality to Sarah's decades-long ordeal. The aftermath closure phase began immediately, but it was not a closure of happiness or true peace, but of profound, agonizing completion. Sarah Jenkins, informed of the recovery by Agent Rossi and Detective Thompson, experienced the definitive end of the hope phase of her grief. The spectral ambiguity of missing was replaced by the crushing reality of gone. Yet this reality, however devastating, carried with it the undeniable truth that her search and her suffering had reached its final horrible destination. She released a joint statement to the media, a brief, dignified declaration of thanks to Dr. Sharma and the state police for their forensic salvation, emphasizing Lily's potential, innocence, and reliability, the high empathy description resonating across the nation. Lily Jenkins's remains were finally brought home to Crestwood, 21 years after she had vanished. Her funeral, held in late June, was not a quiet affair, but a massive, solemn communal event, a release of 21 years of pent-up grief, attended by the now aging citizens of Crestwood and the young adults who had only known Lily as a tragic legend. Detective Thompson, standing beside the resolutary mother as her daughter was finally laid to rest in the tranquil, sun-dappled cemetery near the old high school, felt the crushing weight of the case lift, replaced by a quiet, profound sadness. The weather on that day, a gentle, warm breeze carrying the scent of summer blossoms, was no longer a mocking contrast, but a soft, empathetic presence, a poignant backdrop to the final, heart-wrenching goodbye. The justice, achieved through the cold, impartial logic of genetics, was a hard-won victory against the relentless erosion of time and the profound capacity for human evil, leaving behind a community irrevocably changed, but finally free of the haunting question mark that had overshadowed their lives for 21 agonizing years. The small, tarnished silver crescent moon earring, now catalogued as Exhibit A, rested silently in the evidence locker, a tiny, enduring monument to the power of science to finally reveal the truth hidden in plain sight.